afternoon and welcome. My name is Jennifer Caniglio and I'm with Corporate Counsel Business Journal. It's my pleasure to introduce today's webcast, Re-envisioning the Next Generation Corporate eDiscovery Playbook, presented by CCBJ and H5. Our distinguished speakers are Sean Cheadle, General Counsel Operations for Lockheed Martin Space, Jean-François Denis, Director of Legal Operations for SNC-Lavalin, Erin Hermosi, Senior Manager, eDiscovery Process Owner for TIAA, Carla Webby, Director, Legal and Compliance Business Solutions, H5, and our moderator, Sheila Mackey, Managing Director, eDiscovery Services for H5. Before we kick things off, I'd like to address a few housekeeping items. Regarding CLE credits, please be sure to fill out the survey as well as respond to the pop-up check-in. We will apply for CLE credits in specific states after the completion of the webcast. CLE credit is only available for this live day and not on demand. Please bring to your attention some icons on your console. The green resource icon is where you can download the deck and materials. The purple Q&A icon will allow you to ask questions directly to the speakers or reach out if you're having technical issues. And the teal icon allows you to express your thoughts in our survey. Now, I'd like to pass it off to Sheila. Sheila?
Thanks, Jen. And a special thanks to our panelists and the audience for joining today's webinar titled Re-envisioning the Corporate eDiscovery Playbook. The standard disclaimer is in place today, so the opinions expressed belong to the individual panelists and not their companies. I'd like to ask each panelist to provide a brief introduction, and then we'll get started. Sean, will you please start?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Again, Sean Cheadle. So as General Counsel to Operations for Lockheed Martin Space, I'm in charge of pretty much enterprise-wide for space, procurement and facilities and construction, and a lot of our satellite assembly legal work. We obviously have VPs running those departments, fortunately, but it's a big job that often comes with some litigation and eDiscovery. So I'm the eDiscovery point of contact for Lockheed Martin Space. And a little bit later, we'll talk a little bit more about Lockheed and its structure, but we have 4 segments and a corporate group and legal departments in each, and all of us collaborate on eDiscovery. So big job, and it's important for me to stay abreast of the changes in eDiscovery, how digital transformation is impacting what we do in legal. So happy to be here and look forward to it.
Thanks, Sean. Jean-François?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Jean-François Denis. I'm the Director of Legal Operations for SNC-Lavalin. We're a Montreal, Quebec-based company. We have approximately 45,000 employees right now. So we're a consulting engineering firm. So we do design, all sorts of engineering services, contracts, in major infrastructure programs, in the nuclear sector, and the oil and gas sectors as well as the mining sector. We have operations in Canada, the US, the UK, Latin America, Middle East and Africa, and Asia Pacific. So we're pretty much all over the place. Our department has 59 lawyers with a little over 100 legal professionals, including paralegals, support staff, and contract managers. The legal ops function, is fairly new. I was appointed 3 years ago. And in the province of Quebec, we're just probably 2 or 3 legal operations professionals. So I'm I feel pretty alone in my part of the world. So it's great to have forums such as this one to interact with people.
Thank you. Erin, please.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for having me. My name is Erin Hermosi. I am the eDiscovery process owner at TIAA. Similar to Jean-François' story, our legal ops group is probably only about 3 years old, and so is my role. I have, in the last 3 years, under the team for legal ops and this initiative for legal transformation, built our eDiscovery process, implemented some new technologies, workflows and whatnot. But again, when I started, I call it the infancy. I'm really only at toddler stage right now. But because of the larger legal transformation and legal ops initiatives inside TIAA, there's a lot of forward thinking going on, building out a roadmap for how we're going to address changes in our technology and our platforms. So we're always sort of looking towards the future of how we can mature our process, stay abreast of changes, whether they're legal, regulatory, or just the internal business operations and the tools that they're using, and be able to fulfill our attorneys' needs, which is collecting data from really random places. That's all I got. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you, Erin. Carla?
Hello, everyone. Carla Webby here. I'm the Director of Solutions for Legal Compliance here at H5. I joined H5 about a year ago. I came from a large global corporation, and I worked there for 15 years, implementing eDiscovery program and also information governance initiatives. And today, I help our clients develop holistic solutions, address challenges, and help add new efficient and creative approaches to eDiscovery IG.
Fantastic, thank you. And again, my name is Sheila Mackey. I'm a Managing Director here at H5, and I'll moderate today's discussion. Our goal today is to explore potential new interpretations of the eDiscovery playbook, one that converges different teams, processes, and technologies in order to maximize efficiencies while reducing costs and risk. So let's dive in. I'm sure many of you recognize the EDRM. This is the traditional model, and it dates back to 2005. And this was really a framework that introduced how matters happen, and particularly before a triggering event occurs. And it allowed people to visualize the workflow of eDiscovery, and I think that was really helpful. What happened is it morphed into an updated EDRM, and I'm going to ask Sean to walk us through this, please.
Sure. What this update shows, and I think what you're seeing on the left there, is the IGRM, or what EDRM developed as the Information Governance Review Model. And I like to brief this wheel on the left side from the outside in, so to speak, because what it does is unify governance of data, information, and often policies. And so, and compliance, and maybe even audit would add in there. But, all of these functions that they show as we go into the model obviously support the top one, your business, and hopefully you're profitable as a result, along with other business practices. But clearly, privacy and security, IT, records information management, or RIM, and legal are critical to this. And your company's mix may include other functional groups that are also critical to your IGRM, especially in an international basis. But as we move in, those groups would have an influence on policy integration and process transparency. So understanding how we work together, how data flows, how it's created by the business in the first instance to create value, that's in the green sector of the chart. And then it becomes an asset, and as you move around, risks are introduced to our information. Maybe there's a legal hold required and discovery required. You look at some duty to retain, of course, not only in a legal hold, but upstream in records and information management. And so you're going through your archive, and then you store and secure. And that is more and more critical today, as Panama Papers have told us, and so many other data breaches. So there's lots of, you can do programs just on storing and secure, of course, and how that impacts all of this will. But eventually you need to or ought to be able to dispose of records legally, defensibly, ethically. And so this wheel, I think, is a better representation of what was on the prior slide as a simple box, on information management. Now we're governing data. We have lots of policies involved. And as you slide to the right and move through the traditional EDRM, all of these team players have an impact on how that volume of data is going to create value in your litigation eDiscovery and hopefully make it more efficient.
Thank you, Sean. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the exercise of reimagining or re-envisioning what the EDRM might look like as we go forward. And Carla, will you please walk us through this slide, which will really set the stage for the rest of the conversation?
Sure. I mean, the EDRM has been a great framework to help us organize process and tasks and task owners. But as Sean was saying, with the revised model, it really is acknowledging a very important part that happens in-house, which is the information governance piece. So I think in this re-envisioned, idea of a program, an eDiscovery program that includes IG and compliance disciplines, how do we fold these in, and how do we design processes that are not only addressing repeatability, consistency, and high quality, but also value to the people who execute these tasks, that are held accountable for them. Also, the people who use results that are derived from this, outside counsel, in-house counsel, and others. And also, is this process aligned and designed in a way that is with the strategy of matters, projects, but also your department companies. But with that in mind, we're looking to see also maybe from a process of the creative frustration, trying to overcome the challenges that many of us face. What can we do to redesign a process to make it more effective? And today seems like a really good opportunity as the landscape, the technology landscape is changing, and also the challenges are new challenges. First theme is, can we expand our efforts in reducing and learning about the data in place without moving it? Because this is an opportunity to manage and control data and mitigate any of the data risks that a lot of corporations face. It also would help rid volumes, reduce the challenges of take time, help with issues that arise from cross-border collection, the fact that you would have to deal with moving data from one country to another. So this is an area that's really ripe for it to be looked at. But also, is this an area where we could leverage some of the initiatives of information governance, like using data categorization initiative, where you're looking at, identifying your business-sensitive data upfront, data that would have, business secrets, be related to that could be the basis for privilege later on, PII, et cetera. Also, is your system granular enough that it can help you reduce data sizes intelligently and very granularly? So can you do that in place more and more? And, can you develop methodologies that are more targeted and allow you to focus on targeted collections and data sources, but also is your methodology, your system, a way for you to really learn more about your data upfront and inform the process and the decisions of council and other players early on? So step one, reduce data in place early. The second, and again, this goes to the value and strategy, can we deliver information documents early in the process and maybe challenge the old concept of the EDRM, which to the left, placed volume, and at the very end of the spectrum had value. Can we bring the value closer in the process? So how can we do that? Are there ways for us to analyze large document sets and extract information quickly? The strategy. Are there strategies for production, early productions, that would still be defensible, but still allow us to be very responsive in the matter, and without compromising the holistic approach and of the eDiscovery process, for example, so you can maintain good tracking, etc. Is there a way for me to also address matters that don't require such an involved eDiscovery process? So number two, get value early. The third theme is, can we be smart and introduce analytics early and throughout the process to help us really understand what we have, and throughout the process to develop strategies for review acceleration, reduce the need to do things of lower value, or that be submitted to other workflows. Can I prioritize better? Can I right source? Can I send certain documents to people that can review higher risk documents and other lower risk documents? Strategies many people have employed. And lastly, can we develop a program, a process that is designed to be a knowledge system that reuses methodologies, that has anchored teams that manage the process on a recurring basis, both internally and externally. So is there a way for me to feed back this knowledge, maybe that, or decisions that were made on documents later in the process, back into my information governance workflow? Could I, for example, with decisions of privilege or PII, go back to my data sources and tag and reflect some of the value that I got later down in the process? And lastly, can I, how do I develop a knowledge system that allows me to share information quickly, what I've learned in past matters, or past, because certain matters have related to certain projects or products. How can I share that and redistribute it to other legal teams when they need it faster? So the ability to build knowledge and know-how, and to train teams on repeatability, good process, would also be something here. These are the four themes I would suggest we start with.
Great, thank you very much, Carla. That really helps set the stage. So Sean, within Lockheed, are you seeing a convergence of teams of eDiscovery, privacy, risk, information governance, legal ops? Are you actually experiencing that convergence?
Yes, we are, and it's been for several years now. Really, we've had an eDiscovery working group across the enterprise. So again, we have four big business segments. I'm in space, just one of those, but a corporate group as well, who really leads this effort. Our litigation group, but we also have critical to this mix is security, and by that, I mean, in particular, information security. So from cybersecurity to our computer incident response teams, many of our discovery processes and what this team does will be dealing with a data spill, a privacy inquiry, not just traditional discovery, although they do help with the production of that discovery, because many of our tools are so disparate, not connected, that we need really the convergence of a lot of teams to support us in collections. We will do the reviews within legal, but often our data is replicated across 3 different major cities and sites. And so it's really finding the data map of where things are when we need to. We need a convergence. It really does take a team. So, I would add to the list of, say, eDiscovery, legal operations, compliance. What we call security includes cybersecurity, but it can also be plant security, where we need, say, badge in information from that system, or other employee information that may not be readily available in normal data sites. So it's pretty incredible what this team has to do for a company this large to converge. But it's, if you didn't do that, we're having a lot of diving saves years ago. So the more we collaborate, and not just corporate leading this, business area who are front lines of the litigation, we have a similar connection to all of the teams. So there's a corporate person and a space person in each of these areas of discipline. So if you look at the IGRM, you can look at all those disciplines. I would add the security pieces in there that we do a little different than most companies. You might have to add human resources in there. And they're often front and center on some of the convergence for helping us resolve, especially matters that deal with employees. So that's a great question. And if you're not already doing it, you can't run fast enough to pull these teams together.
Okay, thanks. And Jean-Francois, since you're in the legal ops business of a large company as well, are you seeing the convergence?
Yes, absolutely. We're getting there. The issue with us is that I was in-house counsel for 15 years with a company that was fairly savvy in terms of discovery management. We had a pretty good strategy and processes in place. And I joined now a heavily decentralized company, which has different processes depending on where in the world we're executing those matters. So one of the things that I recommended last year, which we finally implemented, is the creation of a dedicated litigation function. So we went from 50 different lawyers handling litigation cases to only 10 in-house lawyers managing litigation. So that proved helpful, and I'm working with these guys, they're experts, and we're working to develop our approach. So you can already see that we've identified all the areas, all the gaps, and you're really seeing an opportunity. So this is exactly where we're heading and what we're trying to develop here.
That's good to hear. So, Aaron, hearing those thoughts about convergence of different teams, are you seeing a positive impact by applying a lot more of the business principles to the legal division?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about 3 years ago, before we really had any kind of business management strategy within legal, and granted, I joined 3 years ago, but I joined by way of our an acquisition. So my role was moved up to enterprise, and there is a huge initiative and strategy to manage the legal department with business discipline. That meant, matter management, knowing what the work is that's out there, knowing who's working on it, what percentage of their time do they spend on it, centralizing our preferred provider, building a preferred provider program, really. A lot of the legal ops sort of stuff. And as an extension of that, they brought in an eDiscovery person, which was me, where it didn't exist anymore. It used to be sort of a collaboration or a partnership between the attorneys in litigation and a favor from folks in cybersecurity. And one of the challenges in setting up this sort of eDiscovery process or center of excellence has been that security, especially because we're a financial services company, really has a tight grip on the data. And it took a while to build the relationship with them, where I was constantly knocking on people's doors. I need access to this. I need access to that. And I don't want to say that, I don't want to sound the wrong way. Building that relationship and then seeing the work that I do and the access that I need, that it really is legally required. I need to get to this. It's organically grown over time, and such to an extent that, you know, they're coming to me and consulting with me as we roll out like Microsoft 365. What are the things that we're going to need to contemplate from an eDiscovery perspective? I can't say how much I appreciate that, because for a long time, there was a convergence of a lot of the groups like that you'll see on that wheel: compliance, security, maybe legal, but not to the extent that it related to eDiscovery for any onboarding of new applications. And I'm finally getting my foot in the door to say, guys, don't just think about like these items that you have the domain over, but at some point we might need to get data out of there, and that's contemplated, and how are we going to do that? So it does take a lot of cross-functional teams to really get a good eDiscovery process in place. They need to know who you are. They need to know what your function is. And they need to feel secure that you have the capabilities to go out and do this without destroying their data or poking around in places you don't need to be. I have absolutely no time to do that. And they're learning that. And I think you just have to be really annoying at first. It was very hard for me when I first got into the role, because I constantly was saying who I am, what I'm doing, why I need to do this. But over time, you build relationships and you have those key folks that you can go to, and they know who you are. It's really helped. It's really helped for them to understand that I'm not just some random person asking for access to data that I don't need access to, or they just didn't understand why I needed access to it. So there's a big convergence. And I think especially for us right now, as we move to Microsoft 365 and do a big migration into that platform and out of these on-premise platforms that we, at least at an enterprise level, deal with, it's been a great relationship to be consulted and be included in the conversations. I think the next step will be addressing a lot of those in-house or on-premise business applications that aren't going to the cloud, because that is really the big challenge right now, is understanding what data we have that's, you know, not the typical email, network shares, things like that.
Right. I can see that definitely being a challenge. And With the convergence of teams, Sean, and we're now living in the time of COVID, since now all of us are on this webinar and not together doing this, what do you think that impact of COVID will have on in-house going forward in this convergence? Is it helping the convergence come together even more out of necessity? Or what do you think that impact will be, Sean?
Well, it definitely is bringing us together out of necessity, and if you go back to the wheel diagram where IT is a critical player for information governance, or a critical player for our success right now in working remotely. I've worked remotely for a long time, because I travel a lot, so I'm constantly connecting to our systems. But if you look across this model on the screen, just think where COVID impacts it. It's your VPN, it's your Wi-Fi speed, it's our bandwidth at home. If you try to do a collection from an employee who's connected to their Wi-Fi at home, and you're doing that behind the scenes, as many of us are capable of doing, it's going to be a really slow collection. Maybe at preserve in place, we start changing our position on whether we're going to collect or preserve in place, right? Just how we issue the legal hold. So a lot of impacts on the front end of this due to COVID. If you think about one of the things we've done at Lockheed is we've categorized our employees into 4 buckets on when they would return to work. And this is aligned with all of our various state and local orders, following the most strict return to work guidelines, of course, and also ensuring that those that can work from home do work from home. So that impacts, what we're doing in legal when we have a litigation matter, including just our paralegals processing subpoenas, for instance. The ones that come in online, that's great. That's the ones that we prefer, but we still get the hard copy mailed to us. So we've got this tag up where key paralegal goes in and checks the mail. And of course, in 8 weeks, we've received hard copy subpoenas still yet. So those need to be put into the queue, legal holds issued, and then we process remotely the best we can. And so think about too, do you have a cloud-based system? Do you have a system behind your VPN? It's usually what we have at Lockheed. We have a hybrid cloud of sorts, but by and large, where's your data, and how easy is it going to be to actually produce it when you're going in and doing these processes? Many of us can do this review remotely. We probably already do. But it's the production, anytime you got bandwidth going across Wi-Fi, and my son is, sending up his next great composer of music, or my wife, who's got a new book, is being interviewed on video, it's going to slow my bandwidth. So, those are things that I think all of us need to be mindful of. What time of day might we do this? What is the speed? Do you have tools at home to test your bandwidth, right? These are things that I kind of half propeller head. I love knowing how fast my Wi-Fi is and around the house, and that's something that you can actually get an app on your phone to test it. So a lot of impacts from COVID. And hopefully we get back to a reasonable normal. But, I just think that it's going to be with us for a while, and we need to look around the bend at what it's going to take to do collections and production, and any data migration across these small pipes, right? So, and how fast and how long is that going to take? Are you going to meet your deadlines? So a lot to consider.
Thanks, Sean. We could obviously spend the entire rest of this webinar and more talking about just the first piece of this, but moving along to the second part. Jean-Francois, what is the value of producing data in place prior to collection?
Well, I think the potential value is huge. One of the things that we've been struggling with is early case assessment, and I know that a lot of you are feeling the same thing. You need to know fast what are the key strategic considerations. So the legal questions are a given. We're going to look into that. However, if you never know how much data do you have, how many documents do you have, if no treatment whatsoever is done on those documents, it's going to affect your ability to come up with an early assessment of the case's value. How much should it take to to settle that. Is that something that is defensible, etc.? So I think the value is going to be huge at that level. There's also a risk of communicating sensitive information, personal information, privileged materials. So if you proactively manage that, of course, you're going to remove that risk or significantly reduce it. So that's obviously something that is pretty clear to me. We're really, the way we envisioned our litigation team when we created it and tasked it to develop our discovery management strategy, is that we thought that we were reactive. We want to become proactive, but the third step is to become predictive. So to be able early on in each case to tell the business, here's how much it's going to cost us, here are our chances of success. And you cannot come up with a complete assessment if you don't control that part of the equation.
Aaron, are you conducting any pre-collection analysis?
I would say the short answer to that is no, not in any mature sense of the concept, but we do keep track of all of our matters. I've been there enough. We know across matters, how many collections have been done, how many custodians were there. We can compare new matters to old matters to get a sense of, budget requirements. But at least for my team, when we're requested to do a collection, I'm pretty communicative, and so are the folks on my team, about what those results are. I'm like, you've given me a search request. I just want you to know this is 1.5 million emails. I want to consider some like keywords or things like that. Maybe we can cull this down. We are still in a reactive phase. I'd like to get to a stage where we're litigation ready and we have that playbook and we have not the playbook, but a process in place to weed out a lot of junk. I know there's so much junk in there, and I export it on a daily basis, and it goes right in the garbage once it gets to the vendor. But it does require, I think, some agreement between outside counsel, and my counsel, and then my team, that it's okay to take junk out. And that I think the best way to get to that point is to have it identified ahead of time and say, here's your results. We've got 1.5 million. We know that 750,000 of this is just company blast emails. It would be great to get to that point. We aren't there. So I know what I'd like to see in the future, but having developed it or get to a point where we can actually execute that vision is the struggle. And just having the personal bandwidth to do it too. It's a bit of a struggle.
Sean, what about for your teams? Are you seeing any hurdles around doing pre-collection analysis?
Well, if you take me back, 8-10 years, yes, lots of hurdles back then. But as we identified what those hurdles were, we started addressing. For instance, we were Iron Mountain's #1 client. Hopefully, we're not anymore after a massive legacy cleanup. But that, being in discovery made me become a records lawyer. So I had to go upstream and look at what these risks were and these hurdles to really analyze data. So I didn't have this volume that Aaron's just talking about. But in doing so, we had to look at our retention schedules. And, if you have spent a lot of time in retention schedules because they're business needs, there's regulatory needs, especially a highly regulated company like us or perhaps TIAA. I'm stunned when I see a 600 record series record schedule. I would like to cull that down for any type of business, finance to manufacturing, to around 300 record types. Hopefully culling the data long before you get into litigation. But you might be able to go further and say, use the big bucket theory, a 2, 5, 7, 10 year or permanent retention, and really reduce record types. And what that does, I think, is allows more upstream compliance that you saw in the information governance wheel, and then reduces and culls before you ever get to litigation. And now when I get into litigation, hopefully I'm not seeing so many commingled records. I'm not seeing duplication, even though we have great systems that can dedupe and those things. But if I'm going to get true analytics, and hopefully we're going to talk about that still yet, but early case assessment is going to be more valuable to me if I'm able to see quality data in initial collections, and that comes from reduced culling the data before you get there. So a lot of work is required to make that legal and defensible upstream and doing legacy cleanups. And don't forget, I would love to say we're in an ESI world, but for Lockheed, we still have, mounds and mounds of boxes that we have to manage. Hopefully many of those risks are mitigated, but as many of us know, environmental risk can go on and be unearthed later, literally, pun intended, I guess. But, the other thing that I think it helps in producing quality at the source, really managing your information governance is that you have better legal holds and you identify custodians with more quality. And yes, you should be constantly reassessing your litigation hold, adding custodians as they're revealed. In a company like ours, data silos can be in all sorts of places. So it's been quite a work of art to manage the litigation hold process. When we automated that, it became extremely helpful. And as we did a legacy cleanup, we had less records to worry about. And so the custodians were able to provide more quality to us, and we were able to identify these custodians. And I can't stress enough, develop a data map upstream. That's one of the risks, that if you don't know you have the data and someone else finds out for you that you have the data, that's a bad day, right? So understand where your data is, what kind of systems and silos, and I think reduce those or overcome those hurdles, or at least clear them. I was a high school hurdler, so I know what it's like when you hit a hurdle. It doesn't feel good. So anyway, you got to do this work with that convergence of teams, though. You can't do this alone. I mean, Aaron and Jean-Francois and myself, if we didn't have a team helping us, we would really be struggling in front of judges trying to explain ourselves. So, it's a great question, but we can't stress enough. Hopefully many of the listeners are in this process or well ahead of this curve, because by the time you're trying to analyze data in an early case assessment, you need to be looking at the quality of that data. So,
and with quality, we also care about the value. If we move into sort of the purple range on our chart here and start to look at the value, Jean-Francois, what do you see the value of pre-review analysis? Pre-review before analysis and production.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think it's going to have a tremendous impact on your early, or your ability to come up with an early case assessment. It's going to have a true impact on costs as well. I mean, it's going to require costs upstream for sure, but you're going to save later. And I also strongly believe that it will tremendously impact your capability to come up with a sound strategy. How many times have I seen cases in which we're stuck with the discovery phase, with the review, the analysis, the production, and by the time you're done, the delays become tighter and tighter, and next thing you know, you've forgotten to focus on strategy. And we spend too much time. I once heard that discovery costs can amount up to 50%, if not more, in a given litigation matter, and I believe in that. So I think that there's definitely going to be a strong impact on your ability to develop a sound strategy. Another area where I believe that you'll be able to help is to advise your internal investigation team once you have to dig into your data. If some of the work has already been done, there's a good collegial effort between departments, and everybody drinks the Kool-Aid, in other words, and starts adopting that mindset. I think you're going to be doing very well. And same goes for governmental or regulatory investigations. You're going to be able to come up with productions quicker. And once production is done in those things, you can chances are you're going to be able to close that matter in which there's little value added from your department standpoint. You're going to be able to move on to contracts, projects, advising your clients, training your clients. So that's definitely going to be helpful.
Okay, thanks. So we're getting some questions in, so I'm going to try to weave them in. And this is something that I think a good question for now, which is in the selection of eDiscovery vendors, is it driven internally or is that choice made by outside counsel? So Erin, do you want to start the conversation?
We like to have as much control over that as possible. I think costs and just tracking the work that's being done is impossible if you let your outside counsel pick the vendor. You'll have 30 vendors and you're sending data all over the place. We have a master services agreement in place with our vendor. We have one backup vendor that's been onboarded and gone through our, all of our security assessments. But because I'm sending the data to that singular vendor, I've got a great dashboard of everything I've collected, I've sent, and what happened with it after I sent it out the door. How much of it was produced? What is our cull rate based on the search terms that were ultimately used or whatever parameters were ultimately used before it was loaded into, say, relativity. I strongly suggest controlling your vendor relationships and not letting outside counsel do it because you get that management capability and you have I like the single source. I like having one vendor because I get that dashboard and I get that that feedback from them in one location. That's my preference.
John or Jean-Francois, do you want to sort of share what you do with service providers?
Yeah, this is an area that I'm very passionate about. I think the legal department needs to play a leadership role. You need to know the vendors, and ideally, you need to have an agreement in place to tackle aspects such as data hosting. You cannot disseminate your data all over the place. You cannot let external counsel manage this part for you. You need, and I totally agree with Erin, you need to have to manage the relationship with those vendors. If something goes wrong, it shouldn't be up to external counsel whom you're paying for something that is, in my opinion, drastically different. I haven't been tremendously impressed with a lot of external firms' ability to efficiently manage discovery beyond just one or two matters. I know that some of them are pretty good, but the vast majority, I think, are not there. So this is a type of expertise I would like my legal department to hone and to manage.
Okay.
If I could add, we're probably all part of larger organizations. So I'd like to at least speak to, because I echo the sentiments here that, bring it in-house if you can. However, I'll tell you that, I've been a part of the Association of Corporate Counsel for many, many years, doing volunteer leadership work. And I do a lot of work in this area. I get a lot of calls from colleagues about this very question because I used to be solo in-house and I would not be able to afford to bring in an application, much less have the resources to manage it. So there's a lot of great cloud opportunities out there, cloud solutions. Affordable solutions too for right-sized litigation, and I think that the real lesson that we could share with the medium or small law department or even small law firms who are in this business, perhaps on the call, is be ready now with having somebody in the queue. The question was about, do you have vendors lined up? And I would say, you know what? If you ever negotiated a cloud contract, you should have started that yesterday because there's lots of resources on what you should be thinking about in a cloud contract. How do you get your data back, right? All these things that the whole CLE programs around that. So you've got to start early, get folks you like in the queue. Maybe there's vendors on the call that'll start calling me, but I like to talk to vendors. I need to see demos. I need to know what's out there so that we are ready to react because there's not a lot of sympathy in the courts, especially for the larger organizations when you've been around the block a while. eDiscovery's been here since 2006 and you're still not ready. So even if you only have one case a year or one in 10 years, you need to understand what it's going to take to move quickly. So you may have to leverage outside counsel solutions and their tool, their reviews. but you're going to have to know something about what it is they're using so that you can really ask the tough questions on how they did their reviews, right? So there's a lot to unpack there, but I just wanted to speak to the smaller and mid-sized departments who might not have the budget to bring it in-house and actually, administer it.
That was actually a really good question, so thanks for taking that on the fly. Let's talk a little bit about analytics. We've used analytics more in the kind of traditional review analysis production phase of the traditional EDRM, but now we're seeing analytics used in different places and throughout the whole life cycle. So Jean-Francois, what are your thoughts about automating and using analytics for some of the more costly tasks that we have in eDiscovery, such as identifying documents for redaction, auto-privlog creation? So we certainly see a lot of it in the TAR realm, but what about other areas where we can really benefit from analytics?
Yeah, I think you really need to consider it. There's no doubt in my mind. And Quebec is known as, unfortunately, pretty much the far west in terms of discovery management, mainly because our rules are not as stringent as those in the US or in common law jurisdiction in general. So it's sometimes a bit more difficult for our people to relate to this because they're not quite familiar. But I can give you examples of one matter that we handled in the past with one of our vendors, and we had identified 176,000 documents to be reviewed. And it made no sense to me. So what we did is that we tried to automate the review and then returned a very narrow set of documents of about 4,000, which was still too many, but still, at the end of the day, a lot of it had not been done by lawyers. So you have to consider AI at all costs. If you're going to have a long-term strategy that is sound, efficient, you need to consider it. There's no doubt.
Okay. Aaron, are you using analytics in any ways outside of TAR?
Yeah, absolutely. We have interest, and we've examined a couple of applications or platforms that we could consider for a lot of the investigative phase of things. So, investigations are sometimes lead to litigation, but ECA can be run very much like an investigation where we know what's relevant. Let's take a look at it and see what's inside this pile. Or we don't know what's relevant. We don't know what's there. We've had some conversations. There's opportunities out there, and I think there's vendors out there that are providing something that doesn't require the formal processing into a review platform, and then you apply TAR. But just applying those analytics up front to a data set and letting the company look at it. This doesn't have to involve your counsel or your outside counsel. Then you get a peek at it to understand what's out there and maybe what happened in a certain scenario or event. Other ways I'm seeing it creep up is that as we migrate, to Exchange Online and we're getting OneDrives, using that tool, while I don't think it's great for deliverables, when we do a legal hold on some data there, they have some pretty snazzy analytics that you can run against it. You get at least an idea of what you're holding on to or what you may potentially collect if you were to export these search results. And I think what I'm seeing, I guess, is what I'm saying is there are a lot of tools out there that are building in some kind of analysis capabilities. They're not going to be like TAR where it's, here's the needle in the haystack, but it's going to give you insights. And I think anywhere you can find insights into your data, use them because things sneak up on you. There's in Microsoft 365, the thing that I really like were all the error files. And if you put things into a review set in their advanced eDiscovery tool, it tells you, it kind of predicts what's not relevant. Like here's a batch of stuff that's likely not relevant. That is so important. It's so helpful to have that. So I'm always looking for tools and updates to tools that we have that put these little bits of analysis in. We collect, at the point of collection, at the point of transfer, wherever it is, there's lots of opportunities to apply some kind of, either it's analytics or analysis to that data to understand what's there and possibly pull it down, or go get some more if you need to.
Right. Sean, what are you seeing some of the potential benefits from providing analytics and metrics dashboards throughout the entire life cycle?
Well, they're tremendous. I mean, across the and not just the traditional early case assessment. So I think Aaron touched on this a little bit too, but, if we can identify risks just to the business, I mean, some of the things that you learn through discovery is the way your employees are sending data back and forth, where they're sending it, how they're sending it, because, it's been mentioned on this call about how much email that we collect. And so you can see the risks in what has been attached, where it's going, why did they send it there? And it may not even be germane to the case. It may just be that you need to change a behavior or reinforce policies throughout the business that already exist, or you implement new policies. But also you have this element of IMing. The instant message is not Snapchat. It doesn't just go away, and many employees think it does, so they want to take conversations out of email and to go over to IM. 65 days later, plus extra retention, we will have those IMs, and so we can reinforce. But we discover that obviously in our platform through our analytics, and I would say another thing about analytics though is that know what your tools are capable of, and actually use them. So you might be able to detect where these improvement processes could be back to the business, adding value back to the business through policies and whatever. But it's important that you understand what, Erin mentioned her dashboard. It's phenomenal to have a dashboard that actually speaks to you and pops important things out so council can actually readily access them instead of go ask 3 people to find a report, right? Does this tool show me, how many engineers were involved in this case and who are they and what level? Is there any VPs involved in this case? Whatever you're trying to find, know what your capabilities are, and also know that if you already did like most of us and you brought in tools previously, you probably need to refresh those once in a while, and you're wondering about that next buy and you haven't, you get updates to your software, but you may not get the next version that's got the cool analytics. And if you're still on a heritage system, we've migrated through 3 systems, and progressively the analytics get better and better. But today's analytics are pretty phenomenal just compared to 6 years ago. And I just think it's important to actually use them and study them. So that would be my guidance.
Those are really good points. We have about 4 minutes left, so I just want to make sure that we touch on that last piece, which I think is also something corporations are really focused on, which is how do they reuse data and knowledge and work product so they're not paying for it multiple times and they're building in consistency. So Jean-Francois, what are some ways that this potentially reimagined workflow would help build that sharing of knowledge across teams and even within the legal team?
That's to me, there's no doubt that it will contribute, and as I said earlier, legal plays a leadership role, and then this whole system comes together, and then people you create the mindset within the organization, and people start relying on that solution provider, and it becomes at the same time somebody that tremendously supports you. So it's not just on legal shoulder, but you're really maximizing the vendors, the solution providers' input.
Erin, are you using any data reuse strategies at TIAA?
Not data reuse, but definitely process development and reuse, best practices. We do have a playbook. Obviously needs to be updated all the time. Systems change, processes. We learn to do things better. You got to document it and share it. I think one thing that I'm noticing about on that topic is visibility of eDiscovery as a function within legal or as a function at the company. As I've built relationships with the folks in IT that I usually have to reach out to, or folks in the business, it's been good. They're eager to help. They kind of like knowing, like, oh, that's okay. Yeah, I can help you do that. It's a cool field we're in, and I think that relationship and clarity, and actually just one of my goals right now is to build, sort of an intranet site for the eDiscovery team, without divulging, confidential information about the matters. Say, like, this is what we've done. We've collected this much data, blah, blah, blah. Just put yourself out there. As far as the document reuse and work product, again, ultimately, when it comes to work product, it's documentation of your process, and the things you've done. I think another element of that is we're building, well, it's not a great, it's a first pass data inventory or application inventory to get to a point of having a data map. We want to build, and the way we're building it is from the attorney's point of view. So I'm constantly asked by attorneys, what is this application? What's in here? Or what applications are they using in this line of business? And so we're pulling a lot of information from the records management team, from HR for departments, and from IT for our master application inventory, and kind of combining a lot of the information from there so that we can build our own sort of tool that will take the information that we're pulling from them, but then add to it, what are the retention rules? What are the export requirements? What does a deliverable look like out of this? So that as we approach things that we've never done before, which I feel happens to me on a weekly basis, there's another system that I have to access. We have a place to store, the process that we followed and everything we learned when accessing that or collecting from that application, so they can be reused. I mean, I think you have to document what you do, because a lot of times I'm just the one doing it. And if I don't document it, I may never be able to leave, or I'd hurt some feelings if I left the company, left them in a lurch. So.
Okay, documentation is definitely key. We're closing in at the end of the hour. We had some other great questions. I tried to weave them in. But Sean, I thought maybe you could just take us home here, because you started the conversation about the convergence of the teams and technology. And in this concept of reuse of data and knowledge, how do you think that brings together those teams, builds the trust that Erin's touched on, and ultimately creates the defensibility for your program?
Well, it's a tough question for us on reuse of data due to the nature of some of our matters. But I'm thinking of one in particular where, we deal with a lot of government agencies as well, of course. And if a matter comes to us from a government agency, part of the trust that we're talking about is, what has Lockheed Martin done to retain data in accordance with a contract and in accordance with the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation? And I think you gain a lot of trust when you produce the data. We've had customers ask us for data, not even in association with litigation, but because their department moved and they lost the data. So they thought, well, you must have it, right? So we did. And so I think, to the defensibility question, our ability to reuse data or retain data in a compliant manner is an unbelievable opportunity